Okay, hey guys! So today we thought we would talk about how to tell if you are a thinker or if you're a feeler. And we know that we kind of prefer to type based on cognitive functions versus like the letter dichotomies of MBTI because that kind of gets confusing.
Yeah, like I feel like the thinking versus feeling, I mean, we don't really type based on the dichotomies, but a lot of people do, and I think that letter, like the third letter, is one of the hardest ones. It gets people really confused because you either have like thinking or feeling on your top two functions and the other one on the bottom. So there's this tension between like what you kind of are good at, but you might not even know that you're good at because it's your default, versus like what you really admire and what you're constantly valuing because you're trying to get better at that. So it's always like this opposition, and that can get people mixed up when they're trying to evaluate themselves and their own MBTI types.
Okay, so first I think what we should say is definitely not based on feelings in terms of emotions or like thoughts in terms of thinking.
Yeah, like a lot of people, like everyone feels a lot and thinks a lot, so
it should be more like logic versus values probably, and it's just how you make decisions. But this could be confusing because
because everyone can use logic and everyone has values.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you have to determine which one is more important to you. Although that's also confusing because a lot of times we really value in an almost like fangirl like manner or bottom judging function. So I see a lot in my daily life feelers thinking they're thinkers and then vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So I think the best way to tell is what comes more naturally to you, because what you might admire more or value, or what you might even potentially use more if you actually abandon your top functions and you like want to like improve your bottom functions. For me as a thinker, as a TJ specifically, I do feel like recently in the last few years I've really come to value my FI, and so I've like consciously sought to develop it more and to like actually use it more in my day-to-day decision making, or even like long-term decision making and things like that. But ultimately why I can tell I'm a thinker is because, especially like a TJ and a TE user, is that utilizing external logical systems like contingency planning or like figuring out logistics or anything sort of logic-based that is like external and grounded in physical reality just comes fairly naturally to me. It's not something that I have to I don't know.
Lol. Meanwhile, like, yeah, can't do value, but cannot do.
I might not value it actually that much anymore, like, to be honest. Like, I feel like I'd rather have, like, a career that's more aligned with FI values instead of more aligned with, like, TE, like, what's easily feasible thing, if that makes sense. In some ways, I feel like maybe I even use my FI more in making big decisions, but ultimately, like, in just my day-to-day life, I'm probably wielding TE with a lot more ease, and FI is something I kind of consciously take on and try to use.
Similar to that, I feel like I probably have all these like TE domineering like fantasies like way in the background, but generally like, yeah, look at me, I operate day to day with the FI values. But then once I do a TE thing, like if I do something logical, I feel so proud of myself. It's like I noticed something that like when I text my boyfriend sometimes I'm like, hey, I finished all my work today. I'm not saying that to be like, hey, I finished all my work, I'm free, we can like have fun. That's not the reason. I'm just saying it because I feel so proud of myself in that moment, even though everyone works and everyone is supposed to. It's just like an everyday thing that every human does, but then I feel so proud when I like finish a chunk of work that I have to like tell people about it.
Yeah, and I think when I like make decisions based on more like what I value as opposed to like what I feel like I should be doing based on like, society or like others or like
No, even I know, because sometimes like with the YouTube comments or the type of videos that we make, sometimes people don't like them, and then when Alex does something that's very like FI heavy, like I'm gonna say something like bad to that person, or I'm gonna continue doing this thing despite the opposition, you feel so proud. You're like telling me, oh, my FI is so satisfying, yay. That's more like a default to me, I would say.
So now I have some ways of like why certain types might feel they are the opposite. So I'll start with TJs. So I feel like when TJs will act on their FI values in a TE way, that might come off externally or might seem like FE. And I think this is actually sometimes people comment on my videos that I seem FE, and I think that's why. Sometimes I have an FI value of like, okay, I want people who are watching this to like feel okay that, you know, they're an INTJ and INTJs are like blah 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 or whatever. So my FI values this, and then my TE is like, okay, how do I like logically execute that? And that might be through like an emotional means that's seemingly TE, as like maybe using like a softer voice or tone or like my emotional expression on my face, but the process is different than FE, right?
You know what I just remembered? I think someone was saying like, oh my gosh, she's an INTJ, but she says I feel so much. And the INFP says I think so much. Okay, this person does not understand overcompensation. It's actually like so cool. Like you were talking about this in your interview with Forrest, the ENTP, right, saying how like you already see just like your one perspective, and it's so strong first of all already that you need to use the word feel to soften it, whereas I look all flippant and like happy, which it's so funny when I get comments saying like, oh my gosh, that girl looks so silly. It's like, I know. No, like I'm like really, right, I think that was like my next point about like our awareness of our strengths and weaknesses. Right. It's kind of like, I can be super emotional, but I am a dominant feeler, so I'm not afraid of emotions at all, so I'm not afraid to exhibit myself in any sort of emotional spectrum. Like if I'm really, really, really sad, I'm like, okay, I feel that. I felt this like so many times before. It's fine. I know I'll like get over it in a little bit. Whereas like a thinker, I know like once I got really, really upset, and then he's like, oh no, you got upset. I'm like, it's okay. I'll be like fine in like 20 minutes. He's like, oh my god. It's like, yeah, like freaked out. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I can deal with it. I deal with this like every day. Right. So I was talking about the thing where I say I think, yeah, so I need to, like, wait. I know, this is how side note, this is how INE works. Yeah, so I say I think because it's kind of like a nice anchor. Also, I write, so, like, when you're writing nonfiction, you need to choose words that are not flippant. So I need to get rid of, I kind of feel like, or it seems to me that just the thing, like just don't even say I think the thing, just the thing. Yeah, so I've been practicing that in my writing as well, and it shows in my language, hopefully.
Back to the TJ thing. So
I made a super long tangent.
That's okay. Oh yeah, so TJs, I feel like trying to emotionally affect something, if my FI values that, it's not something that comes naturally to me. I don't just know how to do it. I feel like an FE user would just know the most effective way and just generally be in that mental space of generally emoting things in a way that other people can feel them. And
you're more going about it in a roundabout way.
Like, I'm going about it in a conscious way. Like, okay, how do I TE externalize this FI values, which is very different from the process of FE. So it's really hard to tell. You probably won't be able to type people this way, which is why we say, don't type people on behaviors, because that can be misleading. But you can probably type yourself this way, like, oh, maybe I do seemingly FE things, but maybe I'm just a TJ acting on my FI values. Reversely, sometimes FJs will act on their TI in an FE way, and this might seem potentially TE. So usually this will kind of manifest in terms of like organizing people for a purpose, or maybe like networking for some sort of purpose as well. But again, they're using kind of their FE values to connect with other people in order to kind of communicate their TI principles of what they think is logical. So they will still do this in terms of like utilizing an external value system to try to further some sort of purpose instead of using an external logic system. So an actual TE users might organize people and stuff, but they won't really use the value systems to motivate others. They'll just communicate the cold, hard facts and just tell people what to do directly. And it's a very different approach than how FJs will do this.
You see it coming out of like INFPs too. Like people with low TE, like when they're put in a situation that demands TE, suddenly they're like a TE user. But then that's going to cause a lot of stress on their soul until they come back to their natural environment.
Right.
And then they feel so proud. That's the thing. Like, after successfully using your lower, like, feeling or thinking function, you feel so proud afterwards. Like, pat yourself on the back. It's like, oh, yeah, I am a thinker. I think some of you guys have asked me this if I've ever mistyped as something else. I think when I first learned about MBTI, like insisted I must be an INTP because like, oh yeah, I'm introverted and perceiving and intuitive, but I'm definitely logical. I'm so logical. I can use logic. It's like super defensive.
Yeah, basically like what you said, when FPs, when their TE drives their FI, this might kind of seem like TI-ish because they might have some like TE kind of logical facts with which they are using to explore some sort of FI topic. Of the reason why they value this thing is because there's some TE logic behind it. So it might seem kind of like a TI user, like examining logical principles from all angles, but ultimately, again, the FP will be talking about why they value it so much, and then maybe referring back to some external logic, as opposed to really like examining and creating an internal model of logic and using internal logical principles that they've discovered.
Yeah, I think it's probably not super hard to find your judgment axis, but I think people can kind of get confused about which one is higher.
Yeah.
I think especially if you're like kind of lopsided in judgment, well, that's the IPs and the EJs, right? Yeah. Sometimes you're so unconscious about your first function because it's just you're using it constantly that you don't see it, so you only see your weak function, like because you're thinking about why am I so bad at my weak function all the time.
That's true. And conversely, I guess for the EPs and IJs, the middle two functions could work kind of almost in tandem, that it might be hard to decipher like which out of the two is the strongest one.
And the third function is like notoriously strong anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's always arguable, right? Because it's a whole like introverted extroverted debate. Like if you're extroverted, shouldn't you use your extroverted energy to use your first and third functions?
Finally, for the TPs, they might seem kind of seemingly FI if FE sentiments are driving their TE modeling or the kind of the topic of TI understanding that they're going after. For example, they might have some sort of FE thing that they value and that will determine how they are approaching their TI, but usually they do this in this sort of like perceiver-y way where the FE is diluted and not super direct like you get with FJs. But ultimately, FI will be more kind of self-referential, as Calypso says. I think that's a really great term to describe FI, and more about what they think is right. And it's way more subjective in that sense than TI. TI is more about universal principles that should hold true. So yeah, TPs might seem kind of like a feeler when their FE peeks through a little bit, but ultimately FE will still be externally evident, whereas FI is usually more internal and not so evident.
Imagine this INFP who's like gonna sleep dreaming about like world domination and being like an effective person and being like the CEO of a company or whatever. Like they might be like, oh, maybe I am an ENTJ. And then like, you know, there's an ENTJ based off of a real person who's like falling asleep thinking like, oh my gosh, I am achieving success in my work, but am I doing what I want? Am I being consistent to what I hold dear? Okay, I've been doing this video editing thing for years, but then one day I'll like sit down and be like, wait a minute, maybe I should figure out a way to do it more quickly. Maybe I should make a work system or a workflow. See, I can't even say workflow without doing this.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like I only recently kind of figured out the general area of like what I really want to do. Before I just made my decision based on like logic, like, okay, I'm good at this thing, so that seems like a logical career path for me, but I guess my FI wasn't developed enough, or maybe just also being young and not really knowing, not having enough life experience to know yourself.
Like, what I'm good at, that's like the last of my concerns. I feel like, deciding what I want to do, like what I'm good at, that might come up way later in my thought process.
Yeah.
Like, I was talking to a confirmed INTP, and what do INTPs think? She was saying, like, well, she was young, but she was saying, like, oh, when I was a teenager, I would look up how to not be awkward at a party, how to communicate with people, how to fit into the emotional atmosphere. Yeah, so your lower judgment function is the one that you're preoccupied with. That's the danger of typing yourself. The end.
Yeah, to sum up, whichever function, the feeling function or thinking function, depending on your axes, whichever one you feel like you have to use more consciously, that's probably the one that you're not in terms of the letter code.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. Yeah, the one that you're preoccupied with. There's a reason why you're preoccupied with it.
Yeah. So guys, let us know what you think about that. Do you think it's true that you are somewhat preoccupied, or you have to use more consciously the judging function that is lower down on your stack? Or do you see this in others as well? We offer typing services, so if you'd like to know your MBTI type based on micro-expressions, then check out the link below. And if you want to support our channel, we also have a Patreon page that you can check out. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye!